What's going on, everybody? It's Patrick Deng with the Parallax, and today we have a very special guest. We have one of the co-founders of one of the hotter gaming projects coming out right now, and his name is going to be Amar. So Amar, how you doing, man?
Hey, how's it going, Patrick? Great to connect with you, man. And I've heard some of your interviews. I love how you manage them, and it's great to be on it.
Right. I appreciate that, and it's great to have you on. So, starting things off, right? A lot of people may have heard already what you guys are doing on Twitter and everything like that, and X. But for people who may not know who you are and they're discovering you for the first time, how would you describe Revolving Games and everything you're doing?
I often like to answer this question and giving a quick background, which is, I've been in gaming and my co-founders have been in gaming, which happened to be my brothers since the last 14, 15 years. And we had been extremely passionate about building what we built. But one thing we didn't get a chance to build was IP. And what we saw in Web3 was the way you build community is a very different way. And the way they're passionate about what you're building, as long as they understand it. So building IP was something that was very close to our heart, and we were able to essentially build that in Web3 with this amazing community that we've been built, and giving them ownership and a lot of other things after that. From a gaming aspect, when we look at 10 years from now, we feel ownership becomes essential. And that really is the long-term vision of Revolving Games. There are we can get into a lot of breakdowns of what the ecosystem is, how we break it down. But that is really what drove us towards Web3.
Okay, so that's the high level. And
yeah.
Yeah, got it. And I want to kind of dive into your previous experience doing other games, right? And you and your brothers. That's something I noticed before when I was doing research for this interview. I was like, wait a minute, everybody has the same last name, right? So talk to me about that. Have you been working with your brothers for a while in the gaming industry?
I have been working with my older brother for the last, I'd say, since 97. So I come from Pakistan, so internet was extremely expensive back in the day. And that was, I don't know if you remember, but dial-up. And my dad would say, if you want 1 hour of leisure time, you got to work. So we ended up learning a bit of coding. That's the only coding I know, which is HTML, which isn't even coding now. Anyway, so we started our first company. We actually made $600. I've said this a lot of times because it was something quite important in our journey of working together, kind of planning things, actually executing on something and making money. And that started our journey. My brother and I then started our first company soon after our younger brother joined, and we don't hate each other, so we've done well.
Okay.
Often it's brothers either hate each other after working with each other, or they have a really good cordial relationship.
Right.
Ours is pretty good. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. And something you mentioned earlier was during your previous gaming experience, you said that you didn't have a chance to build IP. So what were you doing in those gaming years, right? Was it helping other IPs develop their game?
Yeah, exactly. In 2009 and 10, we learned that, the platform is growing fast. It was a no-brainer. And we always learned that one should specialize. We got into gaming because of that. And we were lucky enough to work on one of the biggest growing IPs at the time, called Fruit Ninja. So we took them cross-platform. And often when I say that, people are like, oh, you built Fruit Ninja, and they don't let you speak after that, right? So the reality was we were so early, but we were also offshore to the Western market in Pakistan. So we were more in engineering focused. That's the team that we built. And we were not able to get that creative out and really penetrate into the market. But we were so profitable right off the bat that we just didn't invest enough or invest time. And I worked on some great IPs. I even worked on Astro Boy Flight with Animoca in 2013. And we worked with Scopely, which is actually one of the largest mobile game companies right now in the world. And their entire brand was focused on working with Hollywood IPs. But the dream was always to build an IP, right? One of our investors he created the biggest gaming IP ever built, Grand Theft Auto.
Oh, yeah? Okay, that's great. Wait, so I have a question. So when you say you work with Fruit Ninja and these kind of guys, is it that you're porting it to like different platforms, or is it that
Yeah,
you're going to
yeah.
different countries, or?
Porting it different platforms. Those guys are extremely passionate. They became very big very fast, but they didn't want to scale, keep the gaming culture, the indie gaming culture that they had. So they wanted to work with some studio that takes over their technology because Unity wasn't there at the time. So it was their internal engine, and we wrote parts of it to essentially extend their port them over to different platforms. And if you remember BlackBerry, Nokia, everybody was fighting for being the number one or even survival at that time. We even ported the game over to a Nokia device, which doesn't even exist, but it was like the biggest device in Africa for the time being that they thought Nokia thought it would be. So quite a lot of interesting things. I got hold of a lot of phones that weren't launched. It was
Hmm.
pretty cool.
Interesting. Okay. So
Yeah.
then you guys pretty much focused on, I guess, taking IPs and porting it to different places. And then that was
That
it. Is
was
that
just with them.
okay? So there's more
Yeah,
things.
yeah. Once we did that, it wasn't a lot of fun, but it was really great to work and learn a lot because porting wasn't just like, now it's very different. At the time, you had to rebuild a lot of things, and depending on the device, the quality would go lower. So the quality assurance was very, very different. In fact, the first team I ran was QA because my background was finance. So that's where I started. I had a CEO co-founder title, but it was very different. It got really boring as well, right? It was extremely profitable because you're basically getting paid for engineering, and it's can be extremely profitable, especially if you're offshore. We learned how to work different deals, and then we started building our own partnerships where we were collaborating, where we were building something which is already an IP. For instance, Astro Boy Flight was one of them. I can't name some, but they were pretty big. And then we basically really built those from scratch. Those IPs were there, but different genres and all of that. We even created our own, but marketing was so expensive even then that we couldn't scale them. We built two card battler games called Blades of Battle, Order of Elements.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So how it kind of worked is there's an IP, and then they partner with you guys, and you guys build a game for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And then
I
do
mean,
you
it's
find
as good as Hollywood IPs.
right, right. And do you find that just because the IP is known, the marketing cost is just like much cheaper compared to if you were to like just do it by yourself or something new?
Absolutely. So that is how the business model works. It depends on the IP, depends how many games or products are out there. For instance, a few years ago, getting a Marvel IP was like you've made it, unless your game is terrible, right? But now there are quite a few Marvel games, so you're actually competing against each game as well. Yeah. So
Right,
so
right.
it can really vary. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And
But I've
so
also seen
mhm,
a lot
mhm.
of IPs fail, which are big, and you're like, this TV show, if the IP, you get the IP, there's no game out there, and it doesn't work.
Right, right. Why is
Yeah,
that? Is it like the game is
I,
not good?
uh, I mean, you can always challenge the game isn't good, but sometimes the audience for that is not really interested in the game.
Oh, like a mobile game in particular,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, or
Right.
any
Or whatever
sort of
game,
game.
right?
Yeah.
Ah, interesting. Okay. So then you're building these games with these known IPs, and then how did you guys get into crypto?
That's a really good question. I moved to San Francisco in 16, but I started going to San Francisco very early. If I remember correctly from memory, 2010, 11. And I would spend a lot of time every year there. One of my brother's friends, I don't know how many bitcoins you'd have today, but he's definitely done extremely well. There are people who trade, right? They buy it, they bought it early, maybe they bought it for $50, but now it's 500, they had to sell. This guy bought every time. He's probably still buying from any fiat currency he makes, right? And he was convincing us in 11 to buy it. I don't have Facebook now, but I still remember 11 I messaged him, 12 I messaged him. 13 I finally bought. We did really well. I thought people used to make fun of me, like, "What are you buying?" But it wasn't like significant amount of money at that time because the cost to buy was so cheap. It became significant in 17 when the
Right.
market rallied.
Right. So you just like held it all
Finally,
the way, kind of thing.
yeah,
Right.
funnily
Right.
enough, we sold in 17 everything.
Right.
I
Everything.
bought a
Okay.
few altcoins, but a bunch of random stuff, but those pretty much went to zero. But other than that, Bitcoin we sold at nearly the peak. And I'm not joking. I literally sold Bitcoin because our mothers were talking about it.
Oh, really? So you're like,
That's
oh,
yeah.
it's like, oh, it's over.
Yeah, I made that decision. Didn't really get back in a big way as an
Right.
investor because most people I talk to, they're like, "Oh, we got in early. We got in 17," and I'm like, "Okay," because yeah. So most people that I meet in Web3 now are all like guys who got in 17, and they made it really big. So in 17, we sold a company as well. So we were taking it some time off. At least I was. I was still working, but I was taking some time off from doing anything. And then in 19, we started Revolving, but it was still Web 2. So to your question, and I'm kind of combining all of this, is I believed in blockchain because when people used to question Bitcoin, there was not a lot to defend it with apart from the technology. And that's over time, my belief in blockchain was getting stronger and stronger. But on the other hand, when it came to, how should I put it, gaming, it was still not there because the use cases, the user experience, in fact, Animoca, we spoke to those guys in 1819 and they were pitching non fungible tokens to me. And
Right.
I literally said, "What are you talking about?"
Right. Right.
And eventually it changed, obviously, for us because we saw it grow. But when NFTs started booming, we had real FOMO around. Hey, are we going to miss the next boat? Like I dove deep into it, and I realized that this is going to be the next big thing. A small example of why is I worked over a decade to get something really special for myself which is like very well known in the finance world. And I showed it to friend's younger brother, and he's like, "What the hell is that?" And then I showed him a Bored Ape, and that was like the big thing for him, right? And I realized at that time that whatever is important to me isn't going to be the future, and we all bet on the future as entrepreneurs because if you're betting on what works right now, it can be good, but it's not revolutionary, it's not something big, it's not impactful, it's a red ocean. Whereas I believe that people who grow up in today's day and age have grown up playing Roblox, graduated to Fortnite and all these massive IPs, and they're already in the metaverse. The way they emotionally look at these things is very different to what, for instance, I'm 38, so the way I look at things is different. If I have $1 billion, I'd be buying real art that I can touch, but that's just me. And I'm not betting on myself, right? And I have that mentality of, and more now, where I want to get it to understand younger people, which is why I'm more active in Twitter. I talk to our community every day, maybe a bit too much, and but that's given me so much understanding. It's just incredible.
Okay. So I guess when during that time you had revolving games and you're doing Web2 stuff, so were you and your brothers were like, okay, like this is the future. We got to go like all in on Web3 or
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So we started raising money. We started building our thesis, and we initially built a second studio. So within Revolving Games, we have two studios, two leaderships, and the second studio is basically became Web3. We gathered a lot of knowledge, and then we implemented it across the board.
Right. Right. Okay, so even now are there still two studios or is it
There are actually two studios that we're setting up a third one, and at the same time, one studio has two games that they're building. So
right?
essentially, four games in the next 8 to 10 months that we're looking at.
Right, right. And then would these all be in Web3 now, or is it
All
some would
Web3.
all Web3? Okay, so now
Yeah.
there's the full transition all the way Web3 now.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right,
The transition wasn't very difficult because our thesis is still make fun games rather than we did end up spending too much money on a farming game. We ended up spending, if I remember correctly, about 2.5 million on a game that was just a farming game, but that built our entire community. So I think that now I was really pissed, but now I feel that was one of the best investments. So I got to give it to my team. Yeah, it was called Skyborne Genesis. It was like, hey, play the game, you get a bunch of rewards. It's the free NFTs we gave, which are worth a lot. We've created like a $20 million value from a market cap perspective. And then those NFTs basically were utilized to play the game and get reap rewards. Those rewards will eventually translate into some things.
right. Got it, got it. Okay. And so for Skyborne Legacy, well, actually, no, before we get into that, okay, so you transition everything into Web3, and then you started with Skyborne Legacy. Was that like the
First
first
IP.
IP? Right.
Yeah.
And so one question I'm personally curious to know is like when you're creating an IP, right? Like how do you go about like how it should look, how it should feel? Like how do you know like this is the look that people want to play in Web3? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mentioned I'm the finance guy, so I look at numbers.
Okay, fair enough.
But my younger brother is more product oriented. He's the guy, but the way I would put it is it's tough. You do test the market a bit. You do gamble a little bit on what you're doing, but the creative really needs to believe in what he's envisioning. So it's usually the creative director or the game director works with his art team and art creatives to give him like paints his vision, and they come up with that. There are a bunch of references that we use, and eventually that could be created. Some people are so gifted they can just come up with it, so it varies. But the way we are set up is we hire, or we try to hire, the best that fit into our culture and essentially can build these IPs from what they've always desired to build, because that's where the passion comes out, and really kill it. We have targets like for Skyborne, it was a broader appeal, a more cuter look, and the goal was, hey, let's try to get a bigger demographic into Web3, right? Versus our second game is big spenders, big like hardcore gamers. They love the game, so that's a completely different KPI we're going towards. When I say big spenders, what I mean is like in Web3, you see a lot of talk about, hey, we have so many wallets, but those wallets might have like really micro transactions versus big gamers, big spenders have big transactions. Just like I often say, it's like a boutique, really high end bank, and then there's a small like the it's like Candy Crush has like probably $1 transactions, most of them, right? But the scale is too big. Yeah. But
Right.
then there are
Okay.
games that you don't know about that make $1 billion a year.
Right. They just have a bunch of whales, right? That spend a lot of money,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
It's like whales can vary, because in gaming, whales can be people who spend $1 million, which is
Right.
crazy.
Right.
But then
Right.
then then there are guys who could be considered as whales, in some for some people is like spending $10,000 a month in the game, right? To me, that's a lot, right? But I'm just saying it varies genre to genre. But I often find out, like, I meet people who are spending all their money, leisure money, on gaming, but that's what they do. Like a lot, like for instance, some people will go out for a drink. Drinks, if you do the numbers, are pretty expensive, right? But these guys would just sit at home, maybe have a beer, and just play games, and that's their entire money going out the door.
Right.
And they like it.
Right. I mean, it's enjoyable to them, right? So.
Yeah, and that's why we're giving them ownership.
Right, right. Okay. And then the second IP that you guys are that you were just talking about that kind of targets these whales, Is that out yet, or is it like something that hasn't
No, we
been?
haven't announced it yet, but it
Okay.
will soon come out.
Okay, got it. Okay, so I'll leave that to that. So now I kind of want to take it to like Revolving Games itself, right? Because right now, at the time of this recording, you have you posted some things on Twitter. Some things are exciting. You got this like cube looking thing that people can interact with in some way. Like, what is it exactly? Is it like company that creates IPs and makes those games? Is it a publisher? Can other people create games with you guys? Like, how do you see it?
Yeah, so Revolving Games is a publisher. We have, luckily enough, if you look at Web 2, you have to build your own games first. There's barely ever been a publisher that didn't have its own games but just had marketing, and then you build games and they market it for you and you have a revenue share. Our thesis is first build your own games, launch them. We'll partner with other gaming studios and go big with them as well. Our thesis is simple. We want to build quality products, but when I say quality, quality comes out of after a lot of dedication, hard work, and time. And we want to go deep with games. And we've seen a lot of Web 2 studios become successful, or publishers become successful, when they really believe in their team and they give them the time to build the right product. It takes time. It takes a lot of pivots within a product to make it successful. And you keep testing it. We've already tested our game a few times, and we're tuning it. Often games get tested, they're launched, they're fully baked, but they launch in soft launches, and it takes them 12 to 18 months to get to public. And you're tuning your KPIs as you go. Often I've seen they've been shaped into something completely different to what we've all thought would be a fully baked product. And you often launched it with a different pseudo name.
Okay, yeah.
um, yeah, so you could probably find our game somewhere in the world.
Oh, okay. Like Web3
Yeah,
games or
yeah, but
got
I
it.
mean, we're testing early metrics around, I'd say, just engagement. It's not
Right.
Web 3 components right now. The way we think of things is more scientifically data driven when it comes to game launches. But on the other hand, going back to your question, publishing is pretty simple. You publish your own games, you invest in other studios, you scale them, and you take them forward. And one of the ways we've been able to establish publishing is through our playbook of building IP in Web 3, through our influence now in Web 3. I think what we've been able to achieve in 3 months is quite remarkable. My team's done an amazing job, spending a lot of time on Twitter. Yeah, I'm joking, but on the other hand, it's been pretty crazy for us. And on the other hand, like we have RCADE coming up, which is a chain, and the chain essentially operates as powering our games, and it'll be an ecosystem token that powers other games as well, which will essentially allow us to work with a lot of other game studios. And there's a lot of knowledge and information that'll be out soon.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
Okay, I just a thought, right? So let's say there's like arcade, right? And this could apply to like any other gaming token as well. Do you think that if one game is successful, that it will impact the economics of other games? Do you get what I mean? Because like
So
if
each
yeah,
game does not need, so there's a node network behind it. So each game
right.
does not need to use RCADE
Okay.
as a token.
Right. Oh, okay, so they don't even okay, so when you
Yeah, I
say
mean, a game, when we publish a game, we believe revenue can be generated outside this token speculative market. So our thesis is very different. And we believe that gamers will still spend money. They will spend money on consumable products as long as they're fun. And you can transfer that on our chain as ownership. And we want to have that and brand that as Arcade.
right, right, right. Just a thought, right? And this is just me talking. Because like, right now, when I look at the Web3 market in gaming, a lot of people are buying things, whether it's the currency, the token, the node, the NFT, whatever, in anticipation, like, hey, like I think this game is going to be successful, so I'm going to buy this early before other people do, right? But I don't really see a lot of people who want to consume in Web3, right? It's maybe you have some information or data that can support this, but it's like nobody wants to like spend like 10K and then be like, yeah, I burned 10K and I enjoyed my playtime. Like in Web2, I feel like that's common already. In Web3, I don't know if it is or not. Like, what do you think about that?
So I'm going to answer it in a different way. So in Web 2, when free to play came, right, people thought that this is insane, right? This is not going to work. There's some crazy people who are spending money and they've gotten tick to certain loops and they're spending money. But they were all wrong because now we're more than a decade forward and the last I checked, which is 2 years ago, we still had double-digit revenue growth annually. I think it's about $120 billion industry just for free to play. Gaming in general is 200. Why I say that is it was very rare for people to spend money, and free to play primarily started on Facebook, but moved and very fast on mobile when payments became easier, right? So it's all about getting used to it, to your point. And I think people will get used to it. Right now, they're not getting entertained by these games. They're purely farming driven games. The incentives are very different. So I do hear a lot of people talk. I actually trolled our community asking them, you guys, like I did a vote, and the vote about just being farmers did win. I said, you're not gamers, you're pseudo famers. Are you a gamer? Vote, or you're just a farmer. So the reality is, to your point, yes, but eventually, as quality of work and game products improve, people will start using them with a different mindset. And I see that happening soon. I think the last cycle was very different. This cycle is more product focused, but they're good products, bad products. Will have products that will fail. The risk with a lot of these people putting money into these things, thinking these are investment instruments, first of all, they should also understand these aren't really sophisticated. Like, they're not sophisticated instruments to invest in. They're just flippers, or they're just trading, or they're, well, it's a very interesting market, but the success rate of a game is less than single digit. It's single digits basically in Web 2. How Web 3 has a 0% success rate right now. I can't name a game that's really successful. Yeah, so I love the fact. I'll give you a really interesting example. We've spent millions on this game. We showed it to a certain community, and they came back and they're like, it's okay. I'm like, okay. We showed like deep gameplay, right? And gameplay on mobile is often like not like as crazy as a Grand Theft Auto. It's like, it's very different, right? If I show you a Candy Crush right now as gameplay, you'd be like, what is that? We've invested, built so much under the hood, and then they're investing in things that just have a cool trailer. So we also realize, from a marketing standpoint, to get the broader audience to play what we're building, you got to build a great trailer as well. We were off the mindset earlier because Apple does not allow you to build like crazy trailers on the
Oh,
App
really?
Store. Yeah,
Okay.
they don't.
I
They
didn't
they
know that.
tell you if this is too far away from the game, they'll cancel. They'll remove your game.
Oh, I see. I
Yeah,
see. I
they
see. So in
don't
Web3,
because they don't want people to download something which is not
like
reflective
reflective of
of
the
what
game.
the yeah
Right,
yeah.
right. But in Web3, it's like, yo, this trailer sick.
It Yeah, it's the opposite.
What's the game? I don't know. Right, right. No, that's
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
Okay. So I totally get that. And one thing that you did mention was nodes, right? Because I think you guys are going to be selling nodes. For people who may not be familiar with what a node is, like what is it first? And then like how does it like play in the whole ecosystem for revolving games?
To really dumb it down, it's essentially you buy a software and you run the software to become some sort of a contributor to the network as like you're essentially helping internet get decentralized, right? You're basically taking a role on to validate either transactions, or you're basically giving compute, I would say knowledge. You're basically giving compute power, not knowledge, sorry, power to the ecosystem. So you could, like, tomorrow we can store data on your node, which is being powered by you. Initially, our nodes are going to be pretty light, so the contribution will increase over time. But when I say light, they can be run in cloud, and you can pay cloud fees, and then essentially mine different things in our ecosystem. So that's the high level I can give.
Right, right.
Um,
And a question before you continue on with that, because, for people who may not be technical, right? So let's say I buy a node, right? And I'm running it on my computer. And then from there, I could either use my hardware on my computer, or I could just pay, I guess, like a software product or SaaS to do it in the cloud, right? And just pay a fee
yeah,
for that. And then I'm essentially just helping secure the network, you could say,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And because I'm securing the network, I get rewarded for that.
I mean, that's the simplest way to explain it. And if you're running it, basically you're providing a service to the decentralization of the internet, right? And that's the best way to be a partaking in the whole ecosystem. It's now your bet is basically to put in that time, effort, and all of that into this. Is how big is that network going to be? How many people are actually going to be part of that ecosystem? Not from a node infrastructure sales perspective, but eventually it comes down to how many people will use the products that the network is supporting, which is for us gaming, right? Gaming essentially is a mass audience market. So your bet is, hey, I'm supporting storage and transactions and gamers. Games are products that are easily able to be scaled. If you see mobile started with mass market of games, like literally Candy Crush, not Candy Crush, Angry Birds, Fruit Ninja. All these games became IPs because these were the earliest apps, right? The use cases were limited on mobile at the time. So you're going to see the same thing on blockchain.
Right. So, okay. So if somebody buys a node, they're just betting on people are going to play the games. And so there's a lot of transaction volume. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah,
People
yeah.
moving money around, right? Okay. Or,
It's both. It's also ownership, right? So just
okay.
buying assets, selling assets. That's, well, you can say that is a transaction, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
Got you. Okay. So one question I have is like, some projects choose to sell nodes, some projects choose not to do it and maybe have it more centralized. Like what's your, I guess, thesis or thoughts on that? Like, do you think it's better for everyone to own a little piece of everything? Or is it like, like, what do you think?
That's a good question. I think these, like, long-term decentralization is better. I think what Web3 to me is very interesting, and I'm not going to get into a political discussion, but it's the right mix of communism and capitalism, right? I think capitalism isn't being, so I'll explain it in a very, like, basic way. I believe capitalism is great, and I'm a capitalist, but it does get too greedy there, right? So the money flows right at the top, and then it trickles down very slowly to the general population. In Web3, you need to make give first, and it is becoming more and more important. And this is why you end up building an IP, because people, your community is your like army, and it's like your population, and eventually it trickles upwards. So kind of like a weird way I see it. But having said that, you have to decentralize. You have to give that and let it run naturally. Um, and I believe, if you believe in, you can have a certain control in making decisions. If you're not, as a project or a company or whatever you call it, is you're not selling assets that you own. You're holding on to them based on the fact that you basically believe the fact that whatever you're building is more impactful.
Okay.
So yeah,
Got you.
that's a
Okay.
roundabout answer I don't want to give.
Right. Right. Yeah, I'm kind of thinking like if you sell a node, you are giving, I guess, people an opportunity, but at the
Yeah,
same time, as the company, you still win, right? Because you're selling something, right? So it's kind of like
we
you're
did give
giving.
free nodes,
Oh, did you?
FYI.
Okay. Okay. Let's
Yeah,
talk about.
yeah, yeah. Our first free NFT was free nodes. Yeah, the Nexian gems are a super node, and they're one of a kind in our ecosystem, which essentially is how we believe that giving to the community will really put us at a different level, and it worked out quite well.
Got you. Okay, I wasn't aware that
So we
the
were,
yeah.
yeah, so we were crazy enough to also give it for free.
Okay, I respect that. Okay, so okay, free nodes. And then so I guess
We're
like
gonna have node sales, but to your point, yes, you generate revenue, and there are a lot of decisions as like leaders of our community. Eventually, people trust in you, and you make those, right? But yeah, there is ownership you're giving to everybody that has its pros and cons. But view it as something that is a need for the future. I don't think you can have a completely centralized Web 2 experience that we have.
okay, that makes sense. And for the other NFTs, right? Like the I guess Skyborne, Genesis, Immortals, and then there's the other one, the I forgot what it was called, like the
RG Bytes.
yeah, the bytes. Like so what are these? Are they nodes too? Or are they related to anything?
So we're changing our ecosystem a little bit, and we're going to be announcing a lot of this. The bytes do become nodes. So nodes could have a different capabilities depending on, like, if you're just talking purely mining, and it creates a certain reward mechanic for you for the input you give in it. So bytes would have a certain lower capacity, gems would have the highest, and they have a certain speculative value of what RCADE would give when RCADE launches. I can't say more. Yeah, and whatever people can understand from it. And then the last part is Immortals will have certain announcements that we have, but they're going to have some things based on rarity. For instance, the rarest Immortals, which are I think about 200, got free RG bytes that are actually, people have valued them pretty high now. I think they're going about half a ETH as we speak. Yeah, much above their mint price. So we have a history of giving back. We're the first Web3 project that actually, when we minted out our paid mint, we made about 3 million or something from it. We actually bid a refund for people. So the NFT market started crashing. So people started panicking about what would happen with these payments. And so we put a bid of at the mint price and said, if you want a refund, you're able to get a refund for 30 days.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So
Got
that
it.
put
Got it.
I don't think anybody's refunded money in Web3.
Not that I heard of.
Yeah, so that kind of, so we have that background or kind of history of really going a long way for our people.
Right,
It's
right.
it's been
Okay.
great.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Now, I kind of switch over to some of the gaming questions actually, because I'm curious about this. Like for a game, right, in Web3, like how do you get real players to play the game, right? I don't know if anyone's like really done it yet, right? A lot of it is like farming activity. But how do we, I guess, as an industry, get people on board? Is it like running a ad and getting them in and monetizing, or is it like
Yeah. So they're
okay,
they're they're pretty established user acquisition funnels, right? Running ads. Facebook is a big way to do it. Instagram. I mean, all these companies literally live off ad revenue at the end of the day. It got heavily affected during the time when Apple changed its privacy laws. I don't know if you know about IDFA, but IDFA essentially was basically you permit as a user to allow Facebook or any app to track your data. Before it wasn't like that. You download it and you were sharing data without you really knowing. So Apple really educated. They wanted to be the leading platform to do it. Obviously, if you see Facebook stock went down heavily after that, Snapchat, all these apps. Um, so what that essentially meant was you were targeting a very casual player for a very extreme game, which means your cost of acquisition is going up, right? If I'm showing you an ad that you're not interested in, that means the company that's showing the ad to you and the company that I'm paying is essentially charging me for something which has very limited, like low, I'd say, conversion rate. So that was the challenge, which has become better as data and people have started sharing more data, interestingly enough. But as these companies have improved their algorithms of user acquisition again, so it's definitely scalable. But our belief is we are able to build IP, and that IP eventually lowers our cost. So that's our bet. And if you see like Pudgy Penguins, Zuki, Bored Apes, they're pretty globally well known IPs, right? They've made enough noise. Yeah, I think gaming will be reflective of that as soon as we have more quality products that come out.
Right, right. So I guess you're basically saying like you got to build the IP first, I guess in Web3. But then
Yeah.
how would you go about building it? Is it like Pudgy is like they're doing Instagram, floor price is high, they're on the news. Is like these kind of things that put IPs on the map or?
Yeah. The thing is that let's say I create a really, really cool art in Web 2. Why would anybody talk about it? Nobody would talk about it because it's just Web 2. What's different? Web 3 is early right now, so it's easy to get that kind of media attention. People don't understand it. They want to learn about it. There are more people joining Web3 every day. There's a lot of noise, and we're very, like, let's be honest, we're very loud and noisy as well. All of us in Web3, we love talking about it, right? Because it's the future. So it's going to change eventually. Like, I'd say 2-3 years from now, what I'm saying is all going to be different, because what Axie built was what Axie could do in the last cycle. It's very hard now. Everybody's like, hey, the gameplay has to be extremely fun, blah blah blah. So each cycle you see changes. I think this is the cycle where it's easy to build IP, where you have this community. How we did it is our playbook was free NFTs, games. We didn't raise any money from the community. We raised VC money and we invested. We built something. We talk about it now, and we had like 100,000 people in our community without even launching something, and people talking about Skyborne. If you go 4 months from now, we were known as Skyborne. We weren't known as Revolving Games. Nobody knew Revolving Games. 4 months later, we have almost 500,000 people following us on Revolving, because we changed the narrative around publishing. And that was always the plan, because our publishing was going to come later and we were just testing out our IP. The IP blew up, and which is why the Skyborne NFT assets became the nodes, whereas that wasn't the plan. but the community, well, yeah, the community was so strong around it that we had to do it. So I often say people who bought in our assets and they held on our assets, they didn't know what they were doing. they just got lucky, because we had a board meeting once, internally, an exec meeting, I'd say, and I said, we're just doing this. It was just a decision that was taken. It had nothing to do with whatever. I would read such crazy speculations of what people thought we were doing.
Right.
It was
Interesting.
fun.
Okay. So do you think that there's going to be like a lot of Web3 IPs that some currently exist, some are going to be new ones popping up, right? Do you think that Revolving Games will ever, like, let's say, partner up with these IPs and like make games? Is that a thing you ever think about?
IPs can be a little complex to work with. I'm really curious and interested, and I'm talking, and there's a lot going on with Web3 IPs right now that have reached out to us, or we know the founders. There are a lot of really big IPs that the founders are also, we haven't announced, but they're on our cap tables. The But if we go to Web 2 IPs and working with them, the only challenge is Web 3 moves so fast, Patrick, that it is an issue to work with them because your pace gets super slowed down. We've done that in the past, and it was frustrating. Yeah, it's extremely frustrating. Like for Skyborne, I can just call our game director. I'm like, hey man, I see this trend, and he'll make a decision fast enough, right? Versus you're going through legal corporations.
Right.
It can be very, very painful.
Right. So do you think like the bigger IPs in Web 2, do you think that it will be a while before Web 2 companies, or not Web 2 IPs, like come in, like Batman, Superman, Hello Kitty, like come in a big way for gaming?
I think they will come in soon. There are two problems, right? Web3 does have this dark negative side to it, reputational side. So they're wary of that. And then on the other hand, it's just a matter of I'd say better use cases. If there's one big success, I think everybody would start jumping in. But I think for them to actually be successful is going to take some time because they create a lot of hurdles for companies to move fast. And if you can create IP within Web3, and in the future, like we talk about games being what movies are, because traditionally we've taken movie IPs or Hollywood IPs into gaming. Now people are talking about a trend where games are going to be movies, and games are going to be what is entertainment in all sort of like weird ways, and then that is how IP creation is going to happen. So then, that if you take that thesis, kind of open that up, then
Hmm.
you do think that everything's going to be created in Web3, right?
Right. Okay. So it actually is a pretty big advantage just to be in Web3 and to build something in Web3, even if you're like an independent person,
Hundred
right?
percent, man. 100%. Like going back to the basic Bitcoin and how it all these transactions and like transfers were built is so complex for a normal user, is why the onboarding has been slower. I've always said, and I think a lot of people say it in different ways, is these engineers that built a blockchain were extremely smart, but extremely the opposite of what product mindset is. So the experience of owning assets is so broken that people don't want to do it. Why is it called a mint, right? The words and the jargon that's used, like I used to literally think burning is mint back in the day when I was getting into NFTs. And why? Because I used to connect burning as burning a CD back in the day, when you would burn a CD and you'd get, use your songs on it. So I was like, what is this? Right? When you build a game and you test KPIs, to my first point, you realize that on the back end, we're looking at data where, 100 users downloaded the game, 18 users left at this point. So we tune every goddamn step in a tutorial of a game, and when you're explaining the game, to the most minimal steps, and it's a whole process run over months. And imagine Web3 has these weird processes of onboarding into a wallet. It's gotten much better now. Once it becomes seamless, right, as seamless as it can be. And I think platforms are obviously stopping that, right? Google, Apple does not want that, right? And it makes sense. I mean, you're gonna bypass their
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 paywall.
financial, yeah, their financial incentives. So everybody makes money in their ways and patterns. Like it's all set up. When I download a game, I don't have to learn much, and I just get entertained. Then I'll start spending, and that's what free to play did as well. Once we have that user experience, this is going to be extremely mainstream, and that takes time. Amazon, literally, my mom needed earplugs, and I literally ordered them at night, and they arrived before I even woke up, right? That experience wasn't there when Amazon started. Took them a while, right? Prime and how they build warehouses and all that, dark houses, whatever. So all of that takes time.
Right.
That experience doesn't come day one, and
Right.
that becomes the edge, right?
Got you. Got you. Almost everyone in crypto, right? They're like positioning to kind of like, we all kind of predict that there's going to be this big wave of people coming in, and it's kind of just being at the right place at the right time during that wave, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So if you look at Amazon again as an example, or any of the companies that started in 99 or earlier before the dot-com bubble, just kept burning capital. The entrepreneurs were able to raise capital, set a vision, pivot in certain areas, and eventually they won when the big wave came, right? And that is what we all are waiting for. So our bet was struggle for a few years, but when you look at the 10-year goal, that you have to be there for the wave, and that is the goal, right? It's going to be a lot of struggle, man. It's not like I haven't made any money. I've only lost money and time in Web3 yet, from a company standpoint. But eventually, yeah, eventually, like I often get like, hey, some NFT wallet sells, and they're like, is it your wallet? And I'm like, yeah, that's so people are like, people are pretty angry with what's happened in the last cycle. And eventually when people think of things as investment instruments, it's a zero sum game, and it's interesting. So for me, I've closed my eyes, and I'm focusing on our 10-year goal, our journey, and where we're going to be, and then that bigger impact comes when we onboard millions of players very naturally. And we want to be one of the products that does that. So that's the exciting part in all of this. So I'll just wait and see, be one of the products that does that.
Yeah, that changes the landscape, I suppose, right? Of course, like you want to be one of the companies that helps shape the landscape, right? Not just like wait for something,
Exactly.
but like get
Exactly.
right. Okay. So as we are coming to the end of our interview, actually, it's in almost an hour now. Is
Yeah.
there any final words you would like to leave our audience, or anything you want to update them on or share about?
Not really. I'm one of those founders who does not shill, and I'm sure there are not many that do that on your show anyway. But I'd say like our to kind of like close this is like our thesis is we really want to build infrastructure for gaming, allow people to build on our infrastructure essentially, and use our playbook to launch big games, big products. And we want to share more and more knowledge with passionate companies that want to impact gaming in Web3 and give people ownership. And ownership is essential because you have to do that in the future. So it's not even whether you agree with it or disagree with it. It doesn't matter. You're not the one that making the decision. It's the public. So we want to have that perfect playbook, and we're improving it every day on how to onboard Web2 companies to get to Web3. And that is really our publishing model, if I have to really dumb it down. And we're eventually, as our size gets bigger, we have more access to capital, we'll be acquiring Web2 companies that we can help do this. Because as you see in Web2 gaming is the biggest narrative in Web3, while in Web2 there are layoffs everywhere. So I feel it's very sad, but at the same time, Web3 is an opportunity to bridge that gap and bring them over and really give them the playbook to publish games here.
Right. That totally makes sense. So anyways,
Yeah.
Ammar, I appreciate you coming on, man. Wishing you guys
Yeah,
the best of
absolutely.
luck of everything. And Parallax family, I'll catch you on the next one. See
Yeah,
ya.
thank you. Take care. Speak soon.
Yep.